He was slammed against his own car, accused of a crime he didn't commit. 12 hours later, the same police officers who humiliated him stood frozen because the man they thought was a criminal was actually an undercover FBI agent. Marcus Williams had just finished a long meeting in the city and was finally on his way home, looking forward to a quiet night. The streets were calm, the hum of his car engine almost soothing until his rearview mirror exploded with flashing red and blue lights. His stomach tightened. He wasn't speeding, hadn't broken any laws, but he still pulled over to the side of the road. Before he could even roll down his window, 3 police officers stormed toward him, shouting for him to step out of the vehicle. Confused and startled, Marcus obeyed, keeping his hands visible. The moment his feet touched the pavement, rough hands grabbed him, slammed him against the hood, and snapped cold metal cuffs onto his wrists. A small crowd began to gather, neighbors, passers-by, and people holding up their phones to record the scene. One officer leaned in close, his voice sharp with accusation. "You match the description of an armed robbery suspect, tall, black male, wearing a dark jacket." Marcus blinked in disbelief. He had been miles away at a corporate meeting during the time of the robbery, but when he tried to speak, his words were drowned out by the clinking of handcuffs and the heavy weight of suspicion. The humiliation was sharp, but Marcus's face remained calm, his eyes steady. Inside, he felt the familiar burn of injustice, but also the cold precision of someone who knew exactly how this was going to end. The officers didn't know it yet, but they had just made the biggest mistake of their careers. The ride to the precinct felt longer than it should have, the sirens wailing above the sound of Marcus's steady breathing. He didn't struggle, didn't argue, he simply sat in the back of the squad car, his wrists aching from the cuffs, his mind silently filing away every detail. The officers chatted in low voices up front, their tone smug, as if the case was already closed. When they arrived, Marcus was escorted inside, past a long hallway lined with buzzing fluorescent lights and curious stares from other officers. In the interrogation room, a young detective tossed a folder onto the table. "We have security footage," he said, sliding it toward Marcus. Grainy still images showed a man in a ski mask, about Marcus's height and build, holding a gun at a convenience store clerk. The detective leaned in. "That's you, isn't it?" Marcus's lips curled into a faint, almost amused smile. "No," he replied calmly, "and you're going to regret making that accusation." The officers exchanged glances, mistaking his confidence for arrogance. For the next hour, they peppered him with questions: where he had been, who he had been with, why he matched the suspect's description. Marcus answered every question clearly, providing details about his meeting, even the names of the people present. Still, they didn't budge. The arrest was already logged. The paperwork was already in motion. What they didn't realize was that Marcus had been quietly sending encrypted messages from his smartwatch during the ride over. Somewhere in a secure office across the city, a team of federal agents was already tracking the incident in real time, preparing to walk through those precinct doors. Marcus knew it was only a matter of hours before the truth would flip this entire situation on its head. The hours dragged on, the small interrogation room growing warmer as the sun shifted high in the sky. Marcus sat with the same calm composure, his hands resting on the cold metal table, while the officers tried every tactic in the book: pressure, intimidation, even false sympathy. "You know, if you just admit it, the judge might go easy," one of them said, leaning in with a smirk. Marcus simply raised an eyebrow. "You really don't want me to start talking, not yet." His words made them pause, but their pride pushed them forward. They doubled down, bringing in a so-called witness, a nervous man in a wrinkled hoodie, who pointed at Marcus without meeting his eyes. "Yeah, that's him," the man muttered. The officers beamed, thinking they had nailed their suspect. What they didn't notice was the small blinking light on Marcus's watch. Outside the room, 2 men in dark suits entered the building, flashing credentials so quickly that the front desk officer barely had time to react. Within minutes, the entire mood in the precinct shifted. The chatter in the hall quieted, and the officers in the observation room suddenly stood straighter, as if sensing something was wrong. Marcus leaned back in his chair, finally breaking into a small smile. "They're here," he said under his breath. A moment later, the door to the interrogation room swung open, and the 2 suited men stepped inside. Their presence commanded instant respect and a noticeable wave of unease from the detectives. "This man," the taller one said, pointing to Marcus, "is coming with us." Immediately, the room fell silent. Marcus stood, the cuffs removed without a word, and as he walked out past the stunned officers, he left them with a single sentence: "Next time, check who you're arresting." The air outside the precinct felt cooler, cleaner, as Marcus stepped into the waiting black SUV. Inside, the two suited men, Agent Collins and Agent Ramirez, wasted no time. "They had no idea, did they?" Collins asked with a faint grin. Marcus shook his head. "Not a clue. They were too busy trying to make me fit their story." The car pulled away, leaving the precinct fading in the rearview mirror. As they drove, Ramirez handed Marcus a folder. Inside were high-resolution photos, names, and financial records. "The man they used as a witness? He's tied to the very gang we've been tracking for months," Ramirez said. Marcus's jaw tightened. The sting operation had been going perfectly until the local police, unknowingly, arrested him during an undercover sweep. 12 hours, Marcus said, almost to himself. "That's all it took for them to blow open our timeline." Collins leaned forward. "Then let's turn that mistake into an advantage. They think you're just some guy they roughed up, but now they've tipped their hand. We know they've been in contact with the gang." Marcus nodded slowly, the spark of strategy returning to his eyes. The SUV stopped in front of a nondescript warehouse, guarded by federal agents. Inside, a large operations board lit up with red pins, photos, and maps of the city. Marcus walked straight to it, pulling a marker from his pocket and circling a spot near the docks. "This," he said firmly, "is where they'll be tonight. And this time, we'll be ready." Around the room, agents began preparing with renewed urgency. The mistake the police made hadn't slowed him down, it had handed him the last piece of the puzzle. Tonight, the people who tried to frame him were about to get the shock of their lives. Night fell over the docks, the quiet hum of the harbor masking the tension in the air. Marcus crouched behind a stack of shipping containers, the dim glow from a distant lamppost casting long shadows. Through his earpiece, Agent Collins whispered, "Targets approaching." Moments later, 3 black SUVs rolled in, headlights cutting through the mist. Marcus watched as the gang's leader stepped out, flanked by 2 men, one of whom Marcus instantly recognized as the so-called witness who had lied to the police. The gang began unloading crates from a container, unaware that they were being surrounded. Marcus took a deep breath and stepped into the open. "Evening, gentlemen," he said, his voice calm but sharp. The leader froze. "You," he spat, disbelief flashing across his face. Before he could move, floodlights roared to life, blinding the men. Dozens of FBI agents stormed in from every direction, weapons drawn. The gang scrambled, but every escape route was blocked. Within minutes, they were cuffed and lined up against the container. Marcus walked past them, stopping in front of the false witness. 12 hours ago, you tried to destroy my life," Marcus said evenly. "Tonight, you handed me everything I needed." The man looked away, unable to meet his gaze. Collins stepped up beside Marcus. "We've got them all," he confirmed. As the gang was loaded into federal vans, Marcus turned to watch the scene. The same docks where a crime empire had thrived were now silent, broken. For Marcus, the night was more than a victory, it was justice. The false charges, the humiliation, the handcuffs, all had led to this moment. He climbed into the SUV, the city lights flickering in the distance. Mission complete. Story closed. And this time, the truth had won. If this story gripped you till the very end, don't forget to like, comment, and share it with others. Subscribe now to Blax Stories for more powerful and unforgettable tales.